Good Sunday morning, everybody. How y'all doing today? Um, don't have a whole lot of updates on the combine as it regards the Seahawks. I didn't hear a whole lot yesterday. Yesterday would have been a day when the team probably would have met with several defensive backs, but for some reason, the usual suspects on Twitter were not reporting who we were meeting with and who the team seemed to have a particular interest in. Now, there's no way we didn't meet with any defensive backs. I feel very confident in saying this team will select at least one day three defensive back this year because there's a clear need, assuming we don't bring back all of our defensive backs that are outgoing, which I'm sure we won't. And it's Pete Carroll. He loves his defensive backs. And honestly, that's been one of the positions where we've gotten a lot of value out of in later rounds. So I'm sure we will. So I don't think we just took the day off and decided, you know what, we don't need to look at any of these DBs. We're good. But didn't hear anything yet. Maybe we will later today. Obviously, the defensive backs are going to do their on the field stuff today. So we'll have a little more information by the end of the day. But for the moment, all I have is what we saw the front seven guys do yesterday, which, I mean, hey, it's pretty interesting. There were a couple guys that have Seahawk written all over them who did very well. Boy Mafe from Minnesota and the linebacker Ebu Kame or whatever from Penn State. Both those guys may very well have earned themselves a trip into the top 50, which means the Seahawks would need to use their first pick to get either of them. But not a whole lot else to talk about on the combine, so I'm going to go ahead and sit on that until we learn about what defensive backs we're looking at initially. So I wanted to talk about this defense a little bit. I wanted to talk about this new hybrid 3-4 type defense that we're supposedly running. And I've said before that I like it. I think it's a good idea to do a hybrid defense this year. I think it's going to get more out of Darrell Taylor, Jamal Adams, and possibly Jordan Brooks. And those are your three stud defensive players going forward for the foreseeable future. Those guys are going to be the cornerstone of your defense for the next, I'd say, at least 3 years in all likelihood. So, that being said, even though I think this is a good thing, there are a few players on this Seahawks defense that you might say they're getting left out in the cold with this new defense. So I wanted to talk about three players who are going to potentially be struggling to find their place in the hybrid defense for the Seahawks. Okay, so first guy is Alton Robinson. This is a guy who had an impressive rookie season in 2020, played really well. I was excited to see more of him, and then in 2021, he basically didn't do anything. And anyone's guess as to why that might be. It might be that he just wasn't that good and he just showed up as a rookie kind of randomly. It could be because he got in Carroll's doghouse and never got out for no good reason. But Alton Robinson, I don't know what he does in a 3-4 because obviously he's a 4-3 defensive end, a Leo. He's about 260 pounds. And typically, when I look at him, I see a guy who needs to have his hand in the dirt. But he's not big enough to be a defensive end in a 3-4. I'm pretty confident about that. So, that being the case, the only chance he has in this defense would be to play outside linebacker. And the early things I've heard from this team are that Alton Robinson is going to get a shot at outside linebacker. And he might be able to do the pass rush stuff, but we have very little evidence of his ability to play in space, to cover, to do the things that outside linebackers need to do. So the few times, I remember there was actually a play in the preseason last year where he dropped into coverage and it didn't go well for him. He got targeted. He gave up I think, a pretty big play. It was weird that we were trying that with him. I understand that they were probably trying to experiment, but I think the experiment didn't go so well. And I know Alton actually played a little bit of a Sam last year, but as far as I can tell, he didn't show any particular propensity for it. So I don't know what Alton Robinson does in a hybrid defense. Obviously, hybrid implies you're going to be doing some 4-3 stuff as well, but you need players with the versatility to do something well in both sets, or else you don't have enough you just don't have enough roster space to have players who do 3-4 stuff and players who do 4-3 stuff separately. So I think that Alton Robinson could find himself as kind of a man without a country. Not big enough to be a defensive end in the new defense, but not mobile and agile and comfortable in coverage enough to be an outside linebacker. However, Alton Robinson, he was a 5th-round pick, and as you can see, he's due less than $1 million this year. You can cut him and only pay him $175,000. Doesn't really matter that much. But this next guy, it matters. Carlos Dunlap, we traded for him in 2020. He revitalized this pass rush, had a great second half of 2020. Last year, I think he got turf toe a few game or two into the season. Didn't really do anything. Basically got benched at one point. Barely was playing. And then at the end of the year, he went crazy. Really, really started to produce against the final, 5 or 6 teams we played. And that revitalized the potential of him coming back in 2021. But now we're switching to this hybrid defense, and I look at Dunlap, and I see a player who probably has something left. He just turned 33. That's not outlandish of an age for a defensive end to continue to be productive. But I see a guy who may not have a great role in a hybrid defense. Now, Dunlap did technically play some linebacker for us last year. He dropped into coverage a lot, but there's a reason why a lot of people, myself included, were critical of that usage of Dunlap. I don't think he was very good at it. I don't know if he was terrible at it, but I didn't get the sense that we were using him to the best of his ability. And to my recollection, one of the reasons why his usage dropped significantly in Cincinnati, and one of the reasons why they ended up getting him out of there for basically nothing, a 7th-round pick, was they started to do some 3-4 stuff, and he didn't really have a place. Now he's 2 years older. I seriously doubt that is going to change. So if Dunlap's kind of in the same position as Alton, where his potential roles in a 3-4 could be outside linebacker or end. He has the size to play defensive end. He's listed at 285. There are plenty of defensive ends in 3-4s that are actually lighter than that. So he's got the size, but that's not really how he plays. That's not really how he does things. In order to be willing to play 3-4 defensive end, you also have to be somebody who's willing to accept the fact that your stats are not going to be there. You're not going to put up big stats most of the time. I don't really think that's Dunlap. And at the end of the day, even though he has the body for it, I don't think his game is built well to play defensive end in a 3-4. And linebacker, I just don't see the agility and mobility, especially at his age, to be able to do it. Now, Dunlap does actually cost some money this year. He's making $6.5 million. If you make him a post-June 1st cut, you actually save over $5 million, though. So we could always do that. But this next guy, not so much. So the third guy that I want to break down here a little bit is Poona Ford. And there's not really any way out of the fact that Poona Ford is going to count some money against the cap this season. Poona Ford, he's due almost $10 million. He'll be due almost $5 million if he's cut or traded. And the only way to lessen that hit would be to extend him, which you definitely don't want to do if you don't feel like he can play in this 3-4. So Poona Ford, he plays like a nose tackle, right? He did his best work as a one tech. He plays like a one tech. He's built like a one tech. But I don't think he's big enough to play nose tackle. Like if he was a few inches taller, and a couple dozen pounds heavier, he could probably play nose tackle in a defense really well. But as it is, with him being 5'11" and 310 pounds, I think that's not big enough. You need your nose tackle to be taking up a lot of space. Guys like Casey Hampton of the Steelers many years ago, the Vince Wilforks of the world, those guys, they're listed at 330, but as Brandon of the Hawks Nest has said on our show a couple of times, they were probably closer to 350, 360. So I don't think Puna can play nose tackle. Now, obviously, there have been 3-4 nose tackles in NFL history that have been even lighter than that. Jay Ratliff was sub 300, but Jay Ratliff was a dynamic pass rusher. Puna Ford, as he kind of proved last year when he tried to play 3-tech, is not. He can do a little bit of work getting to the quarterback, but he's not a Jay Ratliff. That's not his game. So the only place where Puna can fit in, given that, would be defensive end. He's got the strength. He's got the ability to eat up blockers. He's got that stuff. So I give him a chance to be able to do it. But does he have the mobility? You don't need a ton of mobility to play defensive end in a 3-4, but you need a little bit more than you would as a nose tackle or a 1-tech. You do need to be able to move around a little bit. You do need to be able to maneuver between blockers a little bit more than you would as a nose tackle or a 1-tech. So Puna, a little bit of a waddler out there. I feel like Puna deserves a chance to do it. And I'll say this. Carol, you've been watching him play for the last 4 years. You've been watching him in practice. You should know. So make a decision. If you feel like he can do it, he better be able to do it. And if you don't feel like he can do it, then you need to trade him for a 3rd-round pick or 4th-round pick. And that's about it. Let me know what you guys think about these 3 guys. I am in favor of the hybrid defense, like I've said many times. But I am a little bit concerned about these 3 players and their ability to contribute in it. We know that they can do damage in that 4-3, in the cover 3 Carol stuff. I'm not saying we're going to completely abandon that stuff, but you need flexibility to do well in a hybrid D. You can't just be only able to do one thing. So the way I see it, Puna Ford, I want to give him a chance at defensive end. See if he can parlay those 1-tech skills over to a 3-4 defensive end role. I think he can do it, but I'm not positive. Alton Robinson, if he loses a little bit of weight, maybe he can hold us over at the outside linebacker spot. Maybe playing like 10 or fewer snaps a game, mostly focusing on pass rushing. And Dunlap, I kind of feel like it's not going to work. That would be my gut feeling right now. I'm kind of leaning towards needing to move Dunlap after June 1st for the cap relief and to allow him to go somewhere where he can actually utilize his best skills. All right, so that's a little bit of a concern. It's something to consider as we go into free agency in the next few days, and Carroll needs to figure this stuff out because I think it's a good idea, but you need to consider it from every angle. And if I see some of these players on the field next year not performing because they're being asked to do things they're not good at, that's going to hurt us just as much as it might help us to unleash the full power of a Darrell Taylor and Jamal Adams. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. Maybe another video later today, streaming on Twitch later. See y'all then.